video production class at school,
Huh?
so. I'm in a video production class at school,
Yes,
so.
I know.
Okay,
Okay.
it's rolling. We're here with
Here
Mr.
we go.
Jack
My
McGill.
name is Jack McGill. I'm
Wait,
Rachel.
we were talking at the same time, so I'll shut up. 5, 4, 3, 2, nice smile.
My name is Jack McGill. I'm a retired Navy captain. I first came on this planet on March 11 of 1922. My father's mother died when he was 21 months old. His father died when he was 9 years of age. He was raised by Quakers on a 300 and some odd acre farm on the New York-Connecticut borderline. And as a child, I always remember my dad saying to me, if there's ever another war, go in the Navy because you're going to get 3 square meals a day and have clean sheets to sleep on. My dad had been a combat veteran in the Army in World War I, wounded in action, received the Purple Heart, and had a 20% disability for the rest of his life because bad weather, cold weather, winter, whatever, would bother that leg. So, December 7th, 1941, I came home from school a couple of days later and was all set, ready to go join the military, go sign up in the Navy. My dad said, no, it's going to be a long war. Go back to school, come back in May, and meanwhile I'll look for an officer program for you. So that's what I did. I came back, he found a program, and I applied for it. It was an officer program at the United States Merchant Marine Academy. Upon graduation, I received a commission as an ensign in the Naval Reserve. Went on active duty immediately. During my period of time at school, we were required to spend 6 months at sea. I ended up spending 7.5 months on an ammunition ship, made 3 trips from the East Coast, one to the port of Casablanca, the second to the port of Oran, and the third to the port of Algiers in Algeria. After the war, I wasn't sure what I wanted to do, so I got out, worked for my dad. New York City, I didn't like it, didn't like the traffic, the smell of carbon monoxide then. So when Korea came along, I wrote a letter to the Bureau of Naval Personnel, requested to return to active duty. I never told my dad, but anyway, that's what I did. And then after Korea, while I was in Korea, I became chief engineer on a large repair ship, and we operated out of San Diego. Spent almost a year in southern Japan, Sasebo, Japan, in port. After the war, after the Korea, they sent me to graduate school. I went and spent almost 18 months in Monterey, California, and went aboard a destroyer as a navigator and operations officer. The captain liked me, didn't like the executive officer, so we got rid of the executive officer. And meanwhile, I'd been promoted to the rank of lieutenant commander at this point. As luck would have it, he was taken off the ship with a bleeding ulcer and almost died from the loss of blood. So the admiral in Long Beach, where we were operating out of, knew about me from the squadron commodore and decided he would let me keep command of that ship until it was determined what was going to happen with the regular commanding officer. I had the ship for about 4 months and did all the workup. When a ship comes out of the yard, you have a great deal, heavy emphasis on training and working up, getting ready to go in wherever it is, in harm's way, wherever you're sent. So everything I did worked. I had a great crew, and they just thought the world of me because I was just basically a young kid compared to everyone else. And but they wouldn't let me take the ship to the Far East because I was so junior. So I went with a new CEO who couldn't handle the ship at all. And 5 months later, I got command of my first ship. It was a destroyer escort out of San Francisco. It worked very, very well. And 2 years there, and then came down to San Diego for my first 2 years here.
Can I cut for 1 second?
Yeah.
Should we check
Too much dialogue?
Should we check the playback to make sure
Your
the
audio,
sound-
I think, might be really low. I'm gonna listen back.
Yeah, can't you turn that up, control that audio?
I was referring to the vehicle that just came passing.
Had you seen any action before you?
I had at this point, no.
You hadn't seen any action.
Well, I did when I was as a midshipman on an ammo ship. Yes, yeah, we'd had 95 to 100 ships in a convoy, and the subs would come up at night. They'd get underneath the big ship and recharge their batteries, and then daytime, like one time we were in the rear because we had like 9,000 tons of bombs on board. So that would have been a right plum, but they got a tanker carrying avgas right in the next, the guy I'd call Coffin Corner, he's right at the end, and they nailed him. And our ship, the ship just heeled over. I thought we'd been hit, I really did. Well, if we'd been hit, nobody would have ever known it. We'd have gone up like a rocket.
And who was shooting at you?
No, it was the submarines. The U-boats would come up and fire torpedoes.
So this is World War II?
Yeah.
Okay. I'm just trying to get all my...
Yes, World War II. Yes. Are we taping this now?
Yes.
Okay, that's fine.
So I just want to explain, so if the kids are watching this,
Yes,
and just
sure.
because we were multiple exercises and wars. You weren't just in World War II. You had.
Oh,
I just want to make sure that
Well,
we're in the right place here.
Yeah, but we're gonna go on to Vietnam, big time Nam. So anyway, now we're gonna go back to the first command. Primarily, we took reservists for 2 weeks active duty every year, and we'd cruise them. We'd go to Esquimalt, we'd go to Seattle, we'd go to forgot the name of the Vancouver Island. We'd go to Vancouver Island. So it was a fun 2 years. So from there, I came down to San Diego. I was here for 2 years, and then I was selected to command a newer ship, the USS Morton, DD 948. It was a 1,200-pound plant. Prior to that, all plants were basically 600-pound steam. But when you get up to 1,200 pounds, you have superheated steam. It's got an incredible amount of energy that's locked in that steam at 1,200-pound pressure. It goes back to, I forget whose law that is, has to do with pressure-temperature relationship. And as long as you keep it under pressure or vacuum, you can keep it in steam, you can keep steam in its steam state below 212 degrees. You can get it down to 125 degrees Fahrenheit and still have steam. So you're getting the full usage out of that steam from those heat exchangers that spent all this money on oil to convert water to steam. So if you want to be more efficient, you convert the water to steam at a higher temperature, higher pressure. So it was a 1,200-pound plant, brand new, almost. I was the third CO. So from there, I was sent to the War College in Newport, Rhode Island. Very nice, prestigious outfit. They had a very nice program. We were taking classes at George Washington University at the same time in international relations, political science. Get a great education in the military. Great education. Army does better because Army has more troops, more officers, and they run out of things for them to do militarily. So you can go get an MBA from Harvard or whatever. And the Navy has a program you can become an attorney and go to one of the universities in Washington, D.C. So from there, I didn't go through World War II. We skipped World War II somehow. So after getting my commission, I was assigned to an AKA, which is an attack cargo ship. What that means, you don't load the ship for the maximum amount of cargo that the ship can carry. You load the ship at a level so that the particular equipment you're going to use in assaulting a beachhead or to support the troops when they're already ashore, you can have ready access to that. So this was what that was. And we steamed around the South Pacific for 6, 7, 8, 9 months, I guess. And then in February of '45, we invaded Iwo Jima. And I had fun changing over and becoming a boat officer for a couple of days, during which time we're taking in live Marines and equipment and bringing back the dead and the wounded.
Can you tell us a little bit more details about that experience, especially like how old
Scary.
you were? And
Yeah, scary experience. You don't have time to be scared though. You do what it is you have to do. No one is ever born a hero. You do what you have to do. And if it comes out on the other side of it, you did an incredibly great job, then that's wonderful.
did you win any awards
Huh?
from that, from helping with the bringing the Marines in?
Does it do what?
You won awards, right, from that?
Not in that war, no. All of my decorations came from Vietnam.
Okay.
But they didn't hand out many, and it was different. It was different. You know, you could get a Silver Star, and several guys got Medals of Honor. The oldest living Medal of Honor winner is a man by the name of John Fenn. He will turn 100, I believe, this July. He was a Navy Chief Petty Officer at Pearl Harbor, and he got on a machine gun, and the Japs are coming in, and he's shooting at them. He's probably the first man in World War II to shoot down a Japanese Zero. And when they pulled him off that gun, he had 11 or 12 holes in him from shrapnel, fleecing, bullets, whatever, I don't know. But
Wow.
President Obama gave him a personal tour of the White House back here several months ago when they all were there for something going on in the cemetery. I don't recall what it was. But when it was over, he's quoted as saying, "I really like that guy." I do too, by the way. Anyway, so we did that, and then from there we went to Okinawa. As I look back over the years and the war and everything else, we didn't really need to invade Okinawa. We lost a lot of troops unnecessarily in Okinawa, I felt. You should cut.
I'll cut.
That's,
Recording?
did I talk about
We talked a little bit about
Iwo Jima, Okinawa?
Okinawa and
Did
how.
I say it was a waste of time, unnecessary?
Yes, and that's good because
I've said that.
a lot of people died that
Oh,
very,
yeah.
very high
Oh, yeah.
mortality.
Yeah, I know of one ship particularly that a friend of mine was on, and it was a new commanding officer, and the range of his firepower was insufficient to reach the troops that were moving steadily further inland. So he kept bringing the ship closer, and eventually he ran it aground. And this friend of mine was an ensign on the ship that day. When he ran it aground, we needed to lighten the bow of the ship so it would get off the rocks or whatever. So they started shifting ammunition from the forward magazines aft and setting it on the stern, on the fantail. Well, it did not take too long for the Japanese to go, so. So they fired at the ship, and the next thing you know, they blew it to Kingdom Come because they hit all the ammunition that was on the fantail. My friend was on the opposite side of the ship, and he was blown overboard. It was he and one Navy Chief Petty Officer. They were the only two that survived. Wow. Yeah, but you do a lot of stupid things, but you do things under the press of combat. You do the best you can. It may work, it may not, but you do the best you can. Okay? So, what's next? Well, we can move into Korea. I was very fortunate in Korea. I was a chief engineer of a large repair ship. In fact, we used to tie up at buoys in the middle of San Diego Harbor, and we bring destroyers, smaller ships alongside. Aircraft carriers refer to destroyers as small boys because they're rarely more than 300 feet long, and you take an aircraft carrier that's 1,000, probably almost 1,100 feet long with about 5.5 acres of flight deck. The carrier is almost as long as the Empire State Building in New York City is high. Very close, yeah, maybe 100 feet. But anyway, I was a chief engineer. We spent one period during Korea where we spent 10.5 months in Sasebo, Japan, one of the southern islands. So I really got to know the Japanese people and the culture. If I was off for a weekend, I put my English-Japanese dictionary in my pocket. It was about the size of a pack of cigarettes. And I'd go down and I'd get on a bus. And I'd ride the bus till we came to some little town that I found appealing. I'd get off the bus and spend the weekend in that little town. That's a good way to learn, no matter where you are in life. Good way to learn. And I have never found any group of residents in anywhere in the world who weren't really impressed with the idea that you thought enough of them that you were trying to learn their language. So that's something you can put in your hip pocket and remember that. It'll take you through life. And I've been in a lot of places in this world, and I've never encountered anyone rude or negative to my being in their country. So that's basically what I did in Korea, and then I went off and went to school. They sent me someplace. And I had a couple of more commands in there, a lot of staff duty, operations officer for the 7th Fleet. At one point in time, I was actually the director of operations of 60 Navy destroyers that were out there. I got to spend time, we call it in-country, in Vietnam. I did targeting for the battleship New Jersey. This was a ship that had 16-inch diameter cannons. They could fire 21,000 yards. And I would go to the Army, the Air Force, the Marines, and proselyte what that ship could do. So when this ship finally came out to the 7th Fleet and came to Vietnam, they knew what it was that they could do, what the capacity and the capability was. Big gun, 16-inch gun, can probably only fire 750, 800 rounds. And then it has to go in there, remove the bore in the shipyard, and they put in another new bore in that gun. So you have to be very, very careful with how you use that. You don't want to use a 16-inch gun to shoot up a bamboo hut. And that's what I did for several months, traveled all up and down in Vietnam. And then I had command of a destroyer division as a captain, and did a lot of stuff with them, whatever. Did several investigations. I did an investigation of a Marine sergeant who actually had honed the rounds on himself. Normally, the ship knows exactly where he is because he's what we call for fires. And what he is going to ask you to do, where he's getting information from his Marines or Vietnam, whoever they are, you have to make darn sure that you know where he is, because you don't ever want to bring a 5-inch or 6-inch shell in on him. And I did an investigation, and that's exactly what happened. The ship they didn't pay attention to what they were doing. And it's always nice and warm and cozy in the Combat Information Center, and you have your cup of coffee or juice or whatever. But this poor Marine is out there in a foxhole. Pretty tough. Marines, greatest fighting force in the world. Okay? Don't ever forget it. After that, I became I had already been a captain when I had the destroyer division, but then my major command was command of 6 missile ships. And that was to a naval aviator to reach the peak of his assignments is to get the command of an aircraft carrier. In the case of a surface officer, which is what I was, to get a major surface command, which would either be a cruiser or a group of 6 ships. And this that I had the 6 combatant ships. And as such, during that job, I was entitled to be addressed as Commodore. So I was the squadron Commodore during that period. I was there on the gun line at the very, very end. I had 2 destroyers working for me. And this was when the North Vietnamese had broken through the demilitarized zone, and they were coming down. They were on the beach 25, 50 yards in from the water, and I was firing proximity shells. This is a projectile you can set so that when it gets a certain distance from a particular objective, it will explode. You do this back before we had missiles. When we would use proximity fuses in firing on other aircraft, so that if you got within 25 yards, that projectile would break up and fragment into very teeny little pieces. So we did that. And in the case of we're offshore, as I said, I had 2 destroyers working for me. 4 days later, I had 9 destroyers and 2 cruisers. So I spent a great deal of time going in, spending time on the ground, and for which I was awarded several decorations over that period of time, including the Legion of Merit. The Legion of Merit is a very, very prestigious medal. It can be awarded in peacetime as well as in time of war. Mine has a combat V in it, which means it was under combatant circumstances. W.R. Anderson, commanding officer of our very first nuclear submarine, the Nautilus. This was during the time that the Russians had fired Sputnik, and President Eisenhower wanted to do something to get the world's attention. So someone on his staff suggested, Mr. President, why don't we send the Nautilus up on the North Pole, or 90 North. Good idea. It took him 3 tries. The first time, the ice was so thick that the sub was sitting on the bottom and still couldn't pass through. He tried the second time, he got a little further, but this time he bent the periscope, so he got back in the shipyard. Third time he got in and he sent the famous message that read Nautilus 90 North, which means the Nautilus was at the North Pole. And he was awarded the Legion of Merit by President Eisenhower. The next submariner that I know was an officer by the name of Ned Beach. And Ned Beach, probably the earliest captain selected forever, in my opinion. 17th year. Normally you get it in your 20th year. I was selected in my 19th year. But Ned Beach was selected in his 17th year. Forgotten the name of the submarine, but he took it around the world, submerged. Around the world, submerged. The only time he had to come decks awash was off a port in South America because one of the crew members had problems trying to pass a stone that he had got caught in the urethra. Very, very painful. Very like childbirth, they tell me. Anyway, so they came decks awash, but other than that, they completely submerged all the way around the world. All the way around the world. And when he came back, he was awarded the Legion of Merit, also by President Eisenhower. So that kind of pretty much brings me up to date. Great life, I'd do the same thing over, probably. But as I said to Alana earlier today, if I was given one more shot, I'd go to medical school. Only because I could serve humanity.
I have a question.
Yes.
When you were, okay, you're a very political person now. And sometimes it's very difficult to give your opinion while you're in the military.
You have to wipe that out.
How did you, when you were in Vietnam, and now of course we have
Yeah.
the luxury of looking back at it.
Well, even then I did things that I didn't think were probably ideal.
Do you want to
Frankly, over the
explain,
years, and I wondered then if it was really necessary what we were doing. And I look and I go back to the defoliation of the jungles. I personally had command of an 8-gun cruiser and 2 Navy destroyers, one missile ship, one surface ship, without missiles, but they had 5-inch shells. And I would get a list of 10 to 12 targets every day, every morning. Would come out of the Intelligence Operations Center on the aircraft carrier. The returning flights that were bombing North Vietnam, many of them had cameras attached to them, and they would bring back photographs. So I had a list of usually 10 to 12 sites that I could go in and throw shells at, bomb. And I wondered about then. One night I hit a junk that doesn't show up on radar. It's all wood, that didn't show up on radar. And I could hear the Vietnamese running down the side as I don't know how many died, or they were all darkened ship. He didn't know, I didn't know. So I wonder that wasn't my smartest hour.
When Vietnam was over, did you face, sometimes in the movies and the media they talk about people, you know, all the anti-war people, did you feel any of that when you came back? I mean, you were...
No.
Okay, that's...
No, I never saw any of that at all. No. Any other questions? Stephen,
Stephen, come
speak
on.
up.
I don't.
This is great stuff. I mean, we'll never, probably, knock on wood, have
It's a one-shot
that
deal.
sort of experience, and
One-shot.
Jack has really,
Lived it all,
well,
most of it. I guess I'm not really good at coming up with questions.
I think I told you that, right? Well, I really appreciate you talking.
My pleasure.
You have,
My pleasure.
most kids today, what they see on a video game, or, I mean, it's not reality. They kill people, they pop back up again, you know.
Pop back up again.
I know,
That's
but
zombies.
seriously, but I'm just saying that there's not a reality to war.
Well, for example, I went to the Episcopal Cathedral in San Diego, probably 3 Sundays ago, could be 4. I went to listen to a James Carroll. James Carroll was an ordained priest in Vietnam War, and his father was a 3-star Air Force general. And this was the very first Mass, as they say in Catholicism, the very first Mass that he celebrated. And he spent his 10 minutes of his sermon putting down his father and telling his father what they were doing wrong in Vietnam, and we really didn't need to be there. It was a mistake. And I remember Jim Carroll from those days. I remembered him and admiring him then for being so outspoken. And of course, he had nothing to lose because he was a priest. He was not a member of the military. But I went and listened to him talk about 3 Sundays ago, and I bought his book. I bought his new book, and saw him and interviewed him and a little bit and told him who I was and the fact that I had great empathy for him in those days when he was a priest. He's probably written 15 books now.
How do you feel about what's going on now?
Well, now you're getting into politics because I can't address what I feel about now. I feel the country is going in the right direction, but my problem started 8 years ago, right after 9/11. The entire world was at our feet at that time. Did I send you the email of the Russian sculpture piece?
Yeah, it was beautiful.
Beautiful, and yet no one knows where that is. It's in Bayonne, New Jersey, and it looks across to the Statue of Liberty. And the center is tall, and the center of it is a teardrop. And it was from the Russian people. But I'm sure that what I call the wingnuts probably wouldn't want that to get out. They don't want anyone to think that the Russians are human any more than they want to think the Chinese are human. Unfortunate. But the last 8 years, to me, were about as close to disaster as you can get. There never were any nuclear weapons of mass destruction. Never were. Thanks to Vice President Cheney and Bush and the whole crowd of wingnuts, they created it. They created it. We did not need that war. Not need that war. Very sad. And I believe President Obama has brought something to the White House that we haven't seen in 8 years. One word: decency. Cut.